Amnesia: The Dark Descent is a first-person survival horror game that released on September 8th, 2010. It would be a smash hit, especially on the internet. It was played by such popular figures as PewDiePie and Hottest Man Alive Markiplier. The game would later become the base for modern-day survival horror games, but would also bring true horror experiences back to the gaming market. It's been more than 10 years since this game was originally released now, and that begs the question, does the game hold up? Well, that is honestly a good question, especially since a ton more genre-defining juggernauts of the horror gaming landscape have been released since then. A lot of them taking aspects and characteristics from The Dark Descent. So in this video, I hope to find out if the game after all these long years still holds up. Also, I know the game is commonly referred to as Amnesia, but in this video I'll be referring to it as The Dark Descent, purely because there are like, 3, 4, maybe 5 other games in the Amnesia series. Like, they're all good games and stuff, and I know this is the one game everyone thinks of when you hear the name Amnesia, but like, just in case, I'm gonna be keeping it to just The Dark Descent, you know, just in case I decide to cover the other games in the series. The other games in this series are made by the same people, but to my knowledge, they are their own stories and barely, if not at all, connected. Like, there's little bits of pieces that connect to each other, but like, not that much. It's pretty self-isolated from each other. The Dark Descent's plot is pretty straightforward, yet I did find myself confused at many points of the game. What I do know for certain, however, is that you play as a man named Daniel who wakes up in a ginormous castle with no recollection of his memories, aka Amnesia. You have a note that your past self left for you that explains that you need to find a man named Alexander and kill him. Murder him in cold blood. You soon later find out that Alexander lied to Daniel about a ritual, which made Daniel mad because he thought he was doing the right thing, but he wasn't. So basically, Alexander, through lying and manipulation, turned Daniel, who was a decently innocent man, into a murderer. At the end of the game, Alexander uses something just simply called the Orb to open a portal to what I believe is another world. He calls this other world home, which implies that he's from this place, but I don't know if that's the case. At this point in the game, you can now choose to go down the path of 3 different endings, which, to be honest, all 3 are easily obtainable. They're not that hard to unlock. You can get the bad ending where Daniel sacrifices himself to help his friend turned enemy, Alexander. You can get the good ending where Daniel gets revenge and kills Alexander, and closes the portal for good and leaves the castle alive, living a new life as a free man or whatever. Or you could get the secret ending where you throw a decapitated head, which by the way is still alive, into the portal, closing it and killing both you and Alexander. I say it kills both of you, but the ending is kind of cryptic and leaves a lot up to interpretation. Daniel might have survived, but I think the ending was actually Daniel's soul going to the afterlife. I think it's him making peace with all the bad things he's done and moving on, just forgetting about the real world and dying peacefully. Then again, that's just my personal interpretation of it. You can have multiple interpretations if you want. Even though The Dark Descent doesn't have a very character-driven story or anything like that, the game, oddly enough, especially near the end, has a lot of character moments which are really well written and played out. A good example of this would be how Alexander talks in the final level of the game, about how Daniel doesn't see good in Alexander, or how he sees good in Agipai and evil in Agipai, or whatever the hell his name is. I'm gonna be honest, I can't pronounce it and I don't care enough to learn how to pronounce it. Or another good example would be how Alexander talks in the bad ending. He sounds legitimately grateful and a tad bit sad at Daniel's sacrifice. He's happy, of course, because Daniel sacrificed himself and he gets to go home or whatever, but Alexander sounds sad that someone he considered a friend is now gone for good, dead as hell. He sounds legitimately sad. It's quite odd to see such good character moments and such good character writing from a game that, let's be honest, has lackluster character writing and not that many characters in general. The characters really aren't even characters at the end of the day, at least they don't feel like them. They feel like placeholders to take place in a story. They feel like chess pieces on a board, meant to be controlled to get you to the end of the game, to have fun. If there's one thing The Dark Descent definitely excels in, it has to be its atmosphere. The game has such a good, dark, eerie atmosphere to the point of which even when you're in a calm, nice room such as the study and guest room, it still feels as if you're in one big, gigantic, large dungeon. A scary dungeon at that, too. The feel of the atmosphere just keeps you in this moody and fearful state of mind that you feel the need to keep exploring, just in case there's something out there looking for you or at you, hiding in the shadows. The dated textures, which are seen throughout the entirety of the game, also enhance the scare factor of the atmosphere. Call me a stupid, dumb loser bitch boy baby, but I enjoy older games, and sometimes the limitations of the hardware that was available at the time actually enhance the games themselves. The original textures of Silent Hill 2 are great, but I think we can agree they look pretty dated. But the textures from that game make it all the more frightening. This same idea also applies to The Dark Descent. So while many people might say the dated textures are distracting and bad, I personally believe it makes the game even more scary and just better in general. Another thing The Dark Descent has going for it is the soundtrack. Holy holy shit, the soundtrack turns this game from scary and amazing to horrifying and fantastic. Not only does the OST enhance the previously talked about atmosphere, but it also enhances just the game in general. The soundtrack is fantastic and full of so many good and eerie songs. Some of them are even creepy too. They're all really just scary and good in general. I wish I had more knowledge on music so I could have more time and just more knowledge to know about music, because oh my gosh, if I did, I'd be gushing about it right now because this music truly is that fantastic. The music is used to move the story along at points, but the music is also vitally important to the gameplay itself. The music helps you know if a monster, or more specifically the shadow, is hunting you. Once the music is done, then you can continue on with your journey throughout the castle, yada yada, avoid for the monster, wait for the monster to leave, yada yada, avoid it, wait for the music to stop, music stops, you're free to go. So basically it's a pretty important, vital part of the gameplay. Now, I've gone over the many things I love and enjoy about this game, but I think it's about time that I talk about my issues with the game. After all, nothing is perfect, and Amnesia the Dark Descent sure as hell ain't perfect. I don't have many issues, but it would be bad on my part if I didn't bring them up. The puzzles in the game are too easy, and a lot of the puzzles are reused in later sections of the game, and it feels tedious and boring. Like I alluded to earlier, but the game doesn't have the greatest story in the world, like at all. And the good ending of the game leaves much to be desired. All the endings really leave much to be desired, except for the secret one, which is quite interesting in my opinion. But even then, it's anticlimactic and kind of bland. Unoriginal maybe? I'd say unoriginal. I've seen this type of ending in many other things. Also, there's no final boss at the end of the game, which is really weird, and I'm just gonna say it is bad. It is bad. The final boss of this game is just you sitting in a room waiting for something to happen if you do not act fast enough, which by the way, acting fast enough is an understatement because the timer takes forever to start up. Like it takes like a solid minute, 40 seconds, but even then you could easily get the good ending. Because of this, it's incredibly anticlimactic. It doesn't even feel like a final boss or the end of the game. It just feels like a random ass level where you hear people talking. It's really boring and is a bad final level. It is so bad as a final level. It is by far one of the worst final levels in a video game I've ever played. Like I mean it, ever. Overall though, in the grand scheme of the game, these issues are small and not a huge deal at all, except for, you know, the final level one. But there is one thing overall I cannot forgive at all. And please excuse if this section sounds out of place and bad. I just thought of it on the spot as recording, so I have to get it off my chest. But the monsters in this game are so boring. Being chased by them, the music, all the scary shit comes from that. The monsters themselves look goofy and boring. I don't like them. They are bad. They are so bad. Like, oh my gosh, can you not come up with a much more original design, something scary or something cooler? After thinking about the game more and more, I think I'll be giving it an 8 out of 10. It's a fun experience and I think it should be considered a classic in the horror gaming scene. It's really good. Like I said though earlier, there are parts of it that are pretty dated nowadays, and a lot of the tropes that are used in modern day horror games were used in Amnesia first, and God, have you gotten tired of them by now? Because I have. But other than that, it's pretty good.
Excuse me, what the actual fuck are you doing in my house?